the Trinity, from the Holy Trinity. And there's a little bit more later about the Maronite spirituality in general that affected his life. But now we want to see Charbel, who was longing for the hermitage. And we had already said they wait forever to grant him a court. So he applies once and they say no, he applies again and they say no, and then God had to intervene in one way or another. Here is a very beautiful story. One day, Charbel was working in the fields as usual, and now it's Father Charbel, right? He's working in the fields. He was not present when the prior gave an order to the monks that tonight will be a night of silence and darkness. Meaning, you don't light your oil lamps. This is funny, it's a very contemporary lamp, but I brought it to show if there were any kids. Because people would fill oil in the bottom, and they would burn up this little cloth. It would draw the oil and it would make a flame, and that's how they would read and they would see, because there was no electricity, right? So the prior said, no lamps lit tonight, and silence, we don't speak. Well, St.Charbel wasn't, Father Charbel wasn't there. So he comes late to the monastery, he goes straight to the kitchen with his little oil lamp, and he finds two boys in the kitchen, two naughty boys, who were helping the monks and probably discerning. And he says, my sons, can you please fill my lamp with oil so I can do my prayers? Well, they were out of oil, number one, and number two, it was an order. The boys said, sure, Father, you can leave it here, we'll take it to your room in a minute. So he went back to his room, and the boys were like, the other boy was like, you told him you're going to fill his lamp. How are you going to do it? We don't have oil. He said, well, I know what to put in it. And he went ahead and filled the lamp with water, right? And he said, so the boy says, do you think Father Charbel is disobeying the rules? He said, no, he was not here. But this serves him right for coming late for dinner, you know, because he's never paid for dinner. So Father Charbel was absent. They filled the lamp with water. They take it to his room, little naughty boy, and they give it to him and they say, here, Father, you can light up your lamp in prayer. And Father says, may God bless you and reward you, my son. And they sneak behind the door. You know, those old doors with the big keyholes, and under it was like half empty. You could get a snake under the door. And they saw the light come out from under the door. And they peeked in the hole, in the keyhole. They were very frightened, because who lights up a lamp with water? So they peek out through, they see the lamp fully lit. Charbel's on his knees, praying his prayers as usual. They were petrified. So they went to notify the prior, who was very upset with them, and came and said, were you playing with Father Charbel? You think he's your age or what? What are you doing here? You go, your punishment is tomorrow. And the Father Superior enters the room to St.Charbel and says, Father Charbel, what are you doing? Your oil is lit. Your lamp is lit. I don't know you to be disobedient. What does Father Charbel do? What would I do? Oh, I'm so sorry, Father Prior, I was not here. I didn't know you. I shouldn't light my lamp. Father Charbel drops on his knees, taps his chest, and says, forgive me, Father, I sinned. He doesn't defend himself at all. So the prior was intrigued. He runs to the lamp, and he takes it in his hand, and he tastes it, and it's water, and he sees it really, really burning, like usual. And he comes back to him, and he says, stand up, my son. He kneels down, and he says, I am the sinful man. Please give me your blessing. So here we see the student blessing, he's a priest, blessing his superior, and the beauty and humility of this priesthood. St.Charbel didn't have to say a word to explain. God was his defendant, and God said everything about him. This was a great thing. It was the miracle of the lamp that we still speak of today. And it was a sign from God that the monastery and the prior and the order of monks should not stand in his way. That God had carved his way to the hermitage. So there was no more waiting. That was the miracle that allowed the order of the Lebanese order of monks to grant him his going to the hermitage. Charbel's sanctity was then made clear to the superiors. God was calling him to the hermitage, and they could not stand in the face of God. This hermitage was called the Hermitage of St. Peter and Paul. It was about a 15-minute walk from the monastery. And we can see Charbel's wish was granted after 23 years of monastic life, and he set out for the Hermitage of St. Peter and Paul. He took up one small bag, which probably had his reading books, maybe a quick change. On February 15, 1875, he was 47 years old. Okay? So he was 23 when he entered the monastery. 23 years and some, 47 years old, he entered the hermitage. Here is a new phase that we are going to talk about. It's a phase that began a long and very slow burning of Charbel's soul. A soul that had one single goal to achieve, to become one with his beloved, to become dissipated, melted, infused in God. Let us say, a soul inebriated in the Lord. A soul that wants to witness to heaven by already living the life of heaven on earth. A soul that wants to die to this world. It would seem as if he was already in heaven. That's how he lived. I left this dialogue in there because every time I see it, it strikes me on the core. We see Charbel arriving, and we imagine him saying, Lord, here I am. I come on this way of Golgotha to share with you your sufferings. And for the rest of my life, I'm here. There's no leaving anymore. The hermit never leaves. He dies in his cell. Completely alone. And he would probably have told him, my weakness scares me a lot, Lord. I'm very weak. I'm not sure I can handle it. But I want to say that your grace is sufficient for me, and it is my weapon. It's going to help me. With you, the hermitage seems to me bigger than a palace. This is really where I want to be. And I can see the field getting wider and blossoming with more flowers, and the light of your face, which is the aim of my life, shining. Lord, everything here is passing. In this world, the only thing that lasts is your charity. And that's what I want, is to live that charity. Completely dissipated in silence, alone, to live in his cell in prayer, completely taken away. A new phase began for Charbel, a phase of deep, penetrating silence, where nothing could be heard in the nights except for the wailing of animals, and the whistling of the winds in the sheer cold, and the long and steady calling of Christ to his heart. Charbel started to disappear, little by little, to this earth, and to be taken as if he was kidnapped by God. His surrounding was one of extreme austerity, for his bed was made out of thick, coarse animal hair, and his pillow was a log of a tree. His kneeler was a bed of bamboo sticks, which he used to kneel on to allow himself to suffer with Christ on his cross, stripping his frail body from all possible comfort. The rule of life for a hermit was very difficult and demanding, but Charbel took it a notch higher. 1 meal a day only, never ever made of meats or butter or any kind of animal fat of any kind. It was usually some kind of herbs from the fields around him. A hermit slept 5 hours, but Charbel slept 4. A hermit prays and works in silence. Charbel was infiltrated with silence and work and sacrifice and prayer. He cultivated the vine to make wine for his mass, but never, ever tasted the grape. He never tasted the sweetness of that fruit. He would only cultivate it to make wine for mass. He worked the fields and the fruit trees, yet never once did he savor the taste of those fruits. A beautiful story here. After many long years, his brother came to visit him from the village, in the hermitage. Now you have to know the hermitage means there's one hermit. He actually had to wait because another hermit was occupying the hermitage. When he died, he took over. But there are 2 young monks who take care of the hermitage because it's a very large premise, and who also, quote unquote, serve the hermit. In the sense, if he falls sick, I mean, this is not a torture here. It's a giving of self, but if he was sick under orders, he would have to go back. So these two monks would tend to the place and help the hermit, but they could never speak unless it was urgent. They would eat alone. He would eat all his meals alone, and there would be no conversation at all. His only conversation was with God. So his brother comes to visit him in the hermitage. He knocks on the door, and he says, "I'm the brother of the hermit Saint Father Charbel. Do you think I could see him?" And Father Charbel answered, and he said, "Let me see if he's around." He goes to the young boy serving the hermitage, and he says, "My brother is outside seeking to see me. Can I see him?" He's taking permission. And the young boy, flabbergasted, says, "You're the hermit and you're asking me? What am I going to tell you?" So he does end up seeing his brother. He lets him in. And the first thing Father Charbel would ask, "How are you, my brother? Are you good?" "Yes, Father Charbel, we're good." "How is your family? Are you all practicing your religious and church duties?" That's the first thing that's on his mind. The conversation did not last 2 minutes. Father Charbel gets up and he says, "Excuse me, my brother, I have to leave. I have a meeting." And we see his brother so upset, and he's asking the monk, "Who does he have a meeting with? He's a hermit." And his brother told him, "Don't you know? He has a meeting with the one who called him here. He has a meeting with God. That's the only one he meets with." He gave his brother 2 minutes of his time. He felt that he was enjoying the moment too much, and he wanted to offer that up too. So, I love that story. It's really worthy here to note something, I think, for the young people, especially, and for all of us. Charbel aimed to perfection using two means of sanctity. Always in our life, there's going to be a negative way and a positive way. A negative means and a positive means. In the negative means, St.Charbel deprived himself of so much, took away things that were standing in the way. He dropped his cell phone in the garbage, and his computer, and his TV, and even his mom, his poor mom, he left her without seeing her. He let go of so many extras, but sometimes even of necessities, which was too much. He also tried to avoid sin. See, that's negative. Avoid sin, and to avoid temptation from the world. But on the positive side, he worked hard. He was active and cooperated in the plan of God for us as humans. He prayed nonstop. He agonized at night in longing. He adored Jesus in the most holy Eucharist and gave all of his guiles to Mary. It's not enough for us not to do evil. We also have to do good. It's not just one mean, it's both means, the negative and the positive. Charbel depended on God's mercy for his salvation in the passive way, but also was very active in the same time in his salvation. And that made him a very joyful monk, because there was this interaction. He got to the point to where he would kneel on these bamboo sticks, and he would not feel them. They would stick in his skin, and they would enter his flesh, and he would not feel them. One time, there's a story about, now you have to imagine this 100 years ago and more. A lightning struck the hermitage, and a fire caught right by the altar, where Charbel was praying with his arms open to the Blessed Sacrament. The monks ran to the hermitage thinking, "We're going to find him dead. There's no way. There's a fire inside the building." Charbel was on the bamboo sticks. Part of the bamboo sticks and his habit were burning, but Charbel had no idea. He was completely gone. It's like he was not present to earth. Those feelings were just not there. He was completely taken away, absorbed in that adoration of the Holy Eucharist. That was Charbel. Charbel also lived the moment. He never got lost in yesterday or worried about anxieties of tomorrow. He was a man of now. He was childlike in his simplicity. He lived every moment as if he's discovering God now. Not something based, "Oh, I already know this." Every moment is a new moment of God. His obedience was blind, and he would obey no matter what, even if it was against his will. Here's a beautiful story about him never leaving the hermitage, except under obedience. So his prior sent to him, because there was a very prominent man in the village who had a child who was sick, and nothing could heal that child. So they came begging the monastery, and the prior knows Charbel's sanctity. He sent for St.Charbel and ordered him to leave the hermitage, to go to the bed of the sick, and he would leave. As hard as that would be for him, in obedience he would leave. So here we see him leaving, going with this guy accompanying him to the house, and arrived to the house of the sick boy, took a cup of water, spat over it, blessed it, and prayed, and gave it to the dying child. And by the power of God, this boy was healed. So in a way, these were miracles in his life, but at the same time, this depicts to us this beauty of his obedience, right? As a hermit, he could say, I can't leave the hermitage. But everything is prior orders and he has to do. So I'm not going to read this, I'm just going to tell you very quickly the two most important elements in the life of Maronites that St.Charbel really gripped to. The first element would be Mary, Mother of God. So St.Charbel truly honored, revered, and loved Mary and came to her for everything. He also revered the Eucharist. So first the Eucharist. St.Charbel would spend 2 hours in preparation for Mass. His Mass would take 2 hours, and he would spend 2 hours in Thanksgiving for Mass. 6 hours already of the day were passed on the Eucharist. This is not to speak about his long night hours adoring the Blessed Sacrament. So the Eucharist was a very, very, very crucial part of his life. Celebrating the Mass was very important for him. There's another dialogue that I absolutely love. We imagine him telling the Lord, "You brought me here to this Golgotha, and I thank you." I'm sure his nights were very difficult. I'm sure there were many thoughts going in his mind. Is this the right thing? Is this God's will for me? I have no regrets, Lord. I'm here for you. But the people who are my brothers and my sisters, for whom you have redeemed by shedding your blood, they're drowning in tears of suffering. Then we would hear the Lord's call to his heart. Don't forget, Charbel, you're a hermit. And Charbel would say, don't forget that your vocation is the lowliness and deprivation. And Charbel would say, I'm sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. The Lord was telling him, you're even deprived of preaching the gospel, because his Mass was to himself. Can you imagine a priest who could not preach? Hermit, Charbel would say, I know I'm a hermit, I know very well. But what holds me from sharing with all the other people suffering? Aren't you the one who said, comfort my people, the miserable, visit the prisoner? Charbel, I need disciples to save the world through silence. Your vocation is to save with me the souls through silence. Love me and leave the rest for me and not for you. And we hear the exact words echoing in St. Faustina. Love me and don't worry about anything else. Just love me and let me do the work. My Lord, I love you. I love you, my Lord, he would cry in his nights. On these sinful hands, I present to you the tears of those who suffer on earth, and the joys of those who are happy in this world and in heaven. Lord, I love you. Take me, take all of me. I am sure his nights were taken in all these dialogues, night after night. Charbel spoke Aramaic, and his Mass was celebrated in Aramaic. That was the language of Christ. Until today, the Maronite Church pronounces the words of consecration in Aramaic, which was the way that the Lord gave them to his disciples. There's a lot of silence in the life of the Eastern monks and hermits. One thing I would like to mention here is if you come to the Maronite Mass, you notice that we don't have kneelers. We don't kneel because the Maronites were people used to giving their lives for their faith. So they were ready. Like any minute they could be in danger and they would have to die for the Lord. And that's really a state of adoration, as kneeling is a state of adoration. It was just a different mental state. Lord, I'm yours. Anytime you call me, I'm ready to take a run. It was the journey of a pilgrim. In the Maronite theology, we have that in the Maronite theology, the fathers of the Maronite Church began stressing the transcendence of God, to whom the human response can only be silence, and really utter sheer silence. That's why you found a lot of hermits. And that's why Charbel's response to God's love was this very profound silence. Christ became a human. Through his humanity, he took us and gave us his divinity. So we have a very specific prayer in the Maronite liturgy that says, you have united, O Lord, your divinity to our humanity, and our humanity to your divinity. You took what is ours, which is mortality, and you gave us what is yours, which is immortality. That's very much at the heart of the Maronite theology. Another part of Charbel's life was his love to Mary. This is a beautiful icon of Our Lady of Elish, which is a very beloved icon of Mary in Lebanon. It's historical, and I don't know the exact story of it, but I know that it's very beautiful in the history of Lebanon. St.Charbel always prayed to Mary, and she accompanied his days and his nights, and her presence made his hermitage much smoother and sweeter. This is an actual picture that Saint Nimatullah, his novice master, offered him as a gift, and this hung in his bedroom, in his cell in which he died, and today we see it also in that cell where he died. In the cruel cold of a December night, on December 16, 1898, Father Charbel prepared as usual for his Mass, with great fervor and deep silence. Once more, his heart melted on the altar as he prayed, Father of truth, here is your Son, an offering pleasing to you. He lifted the chalice as he trembled and continued saying, accept him, Father, for he died for me. Remember not my sins, Lord. They are many, but your mercy prevails over all the weight of the mountains. These are prayers that the priests recite in the Maronite liturgy. And he fell to the ground as he was gripping in his hand so tightly Jesus, the one whom he spent his whole life calling in the nights and waiting so patiently to see. Jesus, by your sufferings I shall live. Father Charbel did not get to finish this prayer. When he fell to the ground, he wasn't able to let go of Jesus in his hands. A stroke took hold of his weak body, and he never uttered another word. He endured much pain in silence for the next 8 days. I wanted to say here they had to literally rip the host from his hands to take it as he fell in a stroke. He fell in silence for the next 8 days, waiting just to be taken to heaven on Christmas Eve, once more hiding himself in the feast and wanting to be lost in the birth of Christ, so he would get no attention. It was the Christmas, and just there was no time for Charbel, you know? He who was so hidden all of his life continued to be hidden even as he was dying. St. Charbel lived a very balanced life. I'd like you to pay attention and see how he was 23 years and 3 months as he entered the monastery. And he lived 23 years and some months as a religious, and he lived 23 years and some months as a hermit. The Lord cut out his life in these 3 incredibly important phases equally for his age. And he died enveloped in the aroma of sanctity at the age of 70. The just man shall flourish like a palm tree, and like a cedar of Lebanon shall he grow. He was carried by the monks, according to tradition, this is the cell he died in, and that's actually a current picture from today. That was taken probably last summer. It's black because of all the candles burning day and night. So here is an image of the monks carrying him on an open stretcher on a very, very cold, cruel December day, snowing nonstop, except for the 10 minutes that they ushered him down. The sun broke out, and there was this gentle warmth that wrapped them as they traveled down to the monastery. And we see Charbel laying in the monastery. The prior was absent because the patriarch had died that day. It was Christmas Eve. They had to quickly prepare him and bury him. There was no time for him, really. And they put him away, unwrapped, because that was the tradition, on the stretcher, in an outside tomb backing to the church of the monastery. That's where everybody goes as a monk. It was noted that day by his prior, word for word, Charbel's obedience was exemplary. What he will accomplish after his death, from signs and miracles, will be sufficient to tell us about his life on earth, especially in the way he preserved his vows. His conduct was more angelic than human. This is what his prior wrote, and it was a little bit of a prophecy, because Charbel was so silent all his life, and after he died, he was rambunctious. He went all over the place. He wouldn't stop making movement and noise. It was a true prophecy that this good man spoke about, because Charbel's signs started immediately after his death. Few months after he died, some of the villagers came to the monastery and knocked on the door, and they were very perplexed. And they spoke to the prior, "Father, Father, there's something really strange happening here every night. We see a very bright light shining from here. We don't know where." So they walked from the village and told him. And he said, "Light? I don't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about." At the same time, it was the end of the time of the Turks, so we still had the Turk Muslim Ottomans there around the village. They also went up, knocked on the door, and said, they had a lot of respect for the monks, I have to say, the Muslim Turks. And they said, "Father, something is happening here. You know, we have someone that ran away, and we are afraid he's hiding here, and he's using a light at night, because every night there's a light shining from here." So the prior is like, "Light again?" He agreed with the villagers that as they would see the light, they would fire a shotgun. And so they did. They saw the light, they fired the shotgun, everybody ran to the monastery, the Muslim Turks, the villagers, the monks, and who is the culprit? Charbel. His tomb shines with light through the soil and the stone, under the sight of many, many, many people, Muslims and Christians, like this, until the man from the Ottoman said, "There is no doubt, this man is a saint." Everybody knelt down. So there was an order put in to open Charbel's tomb. And here you're going to start to see actual footage from the movie, but these were taken actually from news footage. They open his tomb, which was outside, like I said, and he's on an open stretcher. He had died months ago. And to their huge surprise, they're going to see Charbel's body completely intact, as if he was sleeping, his hair on his beard, and his body, when moved, was very limber and flexible and pink in color, like nothing had happened, like he was asleep and you just happened to drop by. Underneath Charbel, there was a certain sort of liquid. There was like a fluidy kind of liquid. It was a mixture of blood and water, which they had no understanding of where it came from. So orders came. I wanted to say here that somehow that reminded us a little bit of the divine mercy with blood and water flowing from the heart of Christ. So these were actual sheets that they found Charbel in right after he died, I would say in 1988 or 1898 or 1899. There was blood everywhere on his wrappings, and this resemblance with the heart of Jesus in blood and water. So they took permission, wrapped him around, put him in a new casket, put him away inside the monastery this time, till 1926. 1926, there was so many manifestations, and there was an order to open the casket. Lo and behold, Charbel is incorrupt after 28 years, completely flexible, as if he was sleeping, this time soaking in blood and water, filling his casket. So they seal him, wrap him in a zinc casket, put him away, this time inside the cement walls of the monastery. And an order came that no one will open that. And the years went by until 1950. 1950 was a very particular year for St.Charbel. Many, many, many things happened. In the monastery, for months, they were smelling a pungent odor. They had no idea where that was coming from. It would not go away. So they researched and looked and followed, and nothing would lead to the solution. Finally, they brought a crew that was specialized in that, and they traced the smell to the wall. And so they opened the wall, and they found the casket of Charbel soaking in fluid, overflowing from the casket. Meanwhile, the prior of the monastery had a dream in the night saying, "Get up and open Charbel's tomb." And the prior said, "But Father, I can't because I have orders from the patriarch." And the voice said, "Get up and open Charbel's tomb. I am your brother Charbel. Get up and open the tomb." So the tomb was opened, the casket was opened, the fluid was all over, everything was soaked and drenched. So they changed him again and put him in a much stronger casket. This time in 1950, they put him in a glass casket and they had him open so that all the people would come. Meanwhile, miracles were starting. People are begging the saint. They knew he was sick. So here you're going to see actual footage. The body was taken out from the metal coffin, damaged by rust. And the coffin was rusted, but Charbel's body was intact. You're not going to see a full body, and the images are not really great. But here you could see them holding it. The body was washed away. You could see the head, see the shoulders, fully flexible limbs. They were very perplexed. Here, doctors, Christians, Muslims, atheists, everybody came and studied Charbel. It was a phenomenon, and they were really horrific. I dare say with utter shame. They exposed him in the sun. They carved him out and took out his stomach. They tried so many things scientifically to try the phenomena to stop, and they couldn't. He just completely was incorrupt and exuding this fluid for years and years and years. So people started to flood. See the head right here? Fully together, intact with the body. And this is what was on his sheets. Those are still available at the monastery. This is what the monastery started to look like in 1950. Because people came from every country, from every place. You could not walk, you could not step foot. I have a priest telling me they had a rule that every time there would be a miracle, they would ring the bells in the hermitage. And there came to a point where the bells did not stop ringing because people came under his own sight. They left their crutches, they saw, they talked, every ailment was healed. But the greatest ailment was the ailment of the soul. All these are still there, thanking Charbel because they came not able to walk and they left walking. This is the kind of people that was praying the Lord for a saint. So his canonization was inevitable when you had something like that. In 1950, something really ridiculously funny happened. Now we say he was very humorous and very joyful, but he played tricks. So in 1950, he's been dead 52 years, right? There was no cameras at that time, but in America, that started to develop. An American photographer traveled to Lebanon to visit also Anaya and St.Charbel's tomb. And there he met with some pilgrims, and he was very proud about his new camera that he was taking from the US. And he asked them if he could take a picture with everybody, and he got a couple of the monks in the back and developed the picture. And who was there? A surprise visitor. And that's really the only picture we have of St.Charbel, an actual picture, which kind of led us to trace to this picture. And I love the joy on his face. I just want to sink that in. Look at the eyes twinkle. And the picture you see here is only a picture that was painted for the canonization with his eyes down. But this would have more resembled what St.Charbel looked like if we were to trace that image. So 1950 was really a very, very strong year. What else I want to tell you? Over and over, these measures were taken to try to stop the phenomena of Charbel, and they didn't. Now you do know we need a miracle for a venerable to become a blessed, and a miracle for a blessed to become a saint. Right? We need one miracle performed that tells us he is in heaven and God's allowing him these miracles. There were probably 2,000 miracles happening around St.Charbel in 1950. 123 were sent to Rome, and 2 were chosen to base the beatification on. This sister, who was on her deathbed, she had suffered from her stomach for 14 years, to the point to where nothing could enter her mouth anymore, not even water, no surgery, no medicine, of no avail. She was brought to the tomb, carried on a stretcher, and she stopped by the prior and said, "This is my last resort, and I'm spending the night here until he answers." And she left the monastery walking, completely healed. And the second miracle was this man who was blind in one eye for 11 years. And looking upon a picture of St.Charbel, a light penetrated him and he was able to see. So those 2 miracles were the ones responsible for his beatification in 1965. I don't want to give you wrong dates because in 1965, exactly. Now, Charbel continued to exude fluid all through this time, and by now they've moved him to a different casket because of the beatification. And I spoke to the priest who was present as a young priest. Every summer when I go, I talk to him and I get more notes and more stories. And he told me, when they opened the casket before they sealed it for the last time, there were this much liquid in the casket of Charbel. And by the time of his canonization, a few drops around the canonization fell on the floor that they collected, and never again was there any fluid. He lived 70 years, and for 70 years he exuded liquid to call our attention to his sanctity. And then there was no more need for it. That's it, we knew he was sanctified. And the only thing that Father Matar said at the very last is, at that point, his body started to change. He's not decayed, but his bones are not completely attached anymore. He still lays there with a thin film of skin after 100-some years, but his bones were a little separated from each other. But at any rate, that phenomenon was not needed anymore, because we knew that he was completely in the realm of the Lord. The thing that you want to carry is that Charbel weighed 45 kilograms, which is about 99 pounds. By the time he was canonized, he has excreted from his body more than 4 times his weight volume. Wow. So it's true, in his life he was so silent, and the things he did after his death, they surpass any mental capacity to understand what he was doing. We're done. I'm going to tell you about a couple of miracles that are going to blow your mind. I want to say that very extraordinary and very hidden was the silent love of St.Charbel to God. And for that, God blessed him with his name being lifted on holy altars and extending to the ends of the earth. This is footage of his canonization in Rome, the first saint from the East that the Pope canonized. It was humongous. It was huge. It drew people from all over the world. This is actual canonization. I love to see this. And my favorite is to see the pontiff hand to the Lebanese church the certificate of canonization of her child, her son, Charbel. These were the images in St. Peter, the columns, the famous columns that we know. And that's one of the official images that were chosen for him. This is the actual casket today that has been sealed since 77, never opened again. It's in cedar wood. It's inside a crypt in a chapel. And that's where thousands of people flock to on his feast and all through the year. Another couple things I'd like to tell you is that this image, that is the official image that was chosen for St. Charbel's canonization, was painted. That used to scare me. And it's the love of my life right now. His eyes closed talked to us about his interiority. He always sought God and tried to find him in it. His eyes closed also mean his humility. Because you know how the world teaches us assertiveness and look people in the eye and be yourself. Charbel was the opposite. Charbel didn't seem to think that he was your equal. He couldn't look you in the eye. You were always more important than him. So his brother monks would say one would never have known the color of his eyes, because he just didn't lift his eyes in your face. His head was always lowered, his little scheme on his head. And this beautiful picture shows us how he was really, he's a man not of this world. I just absolutely love this one, but that's not the true picture of St.Charbel. That one was a little bit closer to what he would have looked like. I want to say that he is, every moment of his life, he lived in the presence of the Holy One, and today that Holy One grants him the most incredible miracles. Wait till you hear. And the greatest of the greatest. Father Matar told me, you know what's funny? Charbel didn't speak all of his life because he was silent, and now God gives him to speak all the languages of the world, because every country there's a place for Charbel in it. Letters are from Chile, from every country in Africa, from America, from South America. People say they saw him. Plano, we have a miracle. Arizona, we have a miracle after his relics visited last year. We have a miracle is being documented of a young mother who was blind for 2 years in her eye that got sight back last year in Arizona from his relics visiting. He's all over. You don't ask Charbel and not be answered. You're a Muslim, you get it. You're a Druze, you get it. You're an atheist, you get it. You see people there, Muslims flooding his monastery, covered. St.Charbel for them is something very special. And I wanted to say, I think he has 2 roles for us today. He's the saint of our time, because Charbel is the first saint of the East canonized in the West. He's that bridge. He's filling that gap between the West and the East. In a day where today we have terrorists from the East, from those Middle Eastern countries, and we think there's no God, he's at the heart of Christianity in those countries. And that's what people are going to know. There are saints in those countries. He's bridging the gap between Muslims and Christians, because both of them pray to him. And so he's bringing Jesus to everybody. That's an important role that Charbel played. I'd like to move now to, very quickly, 2 of his greatest miracles. One of them very, very recent. I'll tell you the exact year so I don't invent stories. I think it's been 24 years for her. 24 years, I think. 1993. 24 years, exactly. This lady, her name is Nuhad al-Shami. She lived from the same vicinity of the monastery of St.Charbel. So the monastery is up on a mountain. She lived in St.Charbel, which is the lower village. Very pious woman, very simple, not very educated woman. She had borne 12 children in her lifetime, worked very, very hard, and the church was at the heart of her life. So she always went to Mass, worked extremely hard, taught her kids to be on the way of Christ as much as she can. Already it's known in her youth, she had some sort of stones or like kidney problems. You know, back then those were a big deal. And I think that St.Charbel helped her, like appendicitis or something. That was recorded in the book. This miracle is really going to make the hair on your head stand, and it's unlike any other. It's the only documented miracle in Vatican where the saint leaves a mark. Because if a blind is healed, he sees, but we don't see anything. If a cancer is healed, we don't see anything. If a crippled is healed, they leave their crutches and walk. But there, St.Charbel operated on her with his own hands and left a mark until today, 24 years later. She was hit with a stroke again. It's a stroke that threw her in the hospital. She was paralyzed halfway. She couldn't eat or drink. They would have to feed her with a straw, and she couldn't walk. And she remained in the hospital 9 days. Very, very patient and bearing her pain, but frustrated. The 9th day, the hospital doctor said, you need to take her home to die home, because there's nothing we can do. Especially in those times, and in Lebanon, a stroke you don't heal. You just live with it until it's done. Nowadays, it's different. So take her home to die. Before her son took her home, he went to St.Charbel, to the monastery, and brought her oil, the same oil that's here tonight that you're going to be blessed with. And he brought her a candle, and here's one burning, that's from his tomb site also, and incense. And he came and smeared the oil on her forehead, and she said a prayer, and she does say there was an electric current that went through her body. She felt a zapping. and then left and went home, spent home 2 or 3 nights, and then she was extremely sad and couldn't walk, couldn't function. All her kids are grown-ups. It's not like she has little kids. And this is what she reproaches God for. She says, now are you happy? See, I can't go to Mass anymore. Are you pleased with that? I don't know why this would happen to me, but I ask you, either heal me or take me. She was very frustrated. Not even 2 minutes after, she felt regret, and she was remorseful and prayed and cried, and she said, who am I, Lord, to raise my voice to you? Do whatever you wish in me, whatever you want, let your will be done. But she was just so sad that she couldn't go to Mass. That night, so I want you to know that this story I did not read. This story I got from her, because she now is all over the country, and I was so blessed to be in her home and to see she showed me the whole place. So she said she dreamt of being in the Hermitage of St.Charbel, and there's steps. Now she usually has arthritis and cannot walk. She didn't dream that she had a stroke. She couldn't walk because of arthritis. But she saw herself climb up the stairs of the monastery, of the Hermitage, until she got up to the top where there was a Mass being said. And she came to go to communion, and all of a sudden, in her dream, she sees St.Charbel giving her communion. So she received communion from his hands. And she woke up very consoled, just feeling this sweet balm wrapping her heart. Nothing happened. 3 days later, she's sleeping in her room, 2 beds, very simple, humble room, closet, little nightstand, and 2 beds. Her older daughter, who had just had a baby, is sleeping with her on this bed, with the baby, so she could nurse the baby at night and watch over her mom. Her mom is in bed, prompted with 2 pillows, usually behind her back, that they took out and threw at the foot of the bed, and she's asleep. A statue of Mary is on her nightstand. She dreams, right? It's in a dream. A blinding light at the door. She tries to look at it, but she couldn't see. It was as if the light was the source itself. She didn't know where that light was coming from. But she saw 2 silhouettes of monks entering in that light to her room. She was frightened in the dream and was yelling and screaming, who are you? What do you want of me? What are you doing in my room? And the priest said, be tranquil, be not afraid, Nuhad, by her name. I am Father Charbel. I have come to operate on you. And Nuhad was screaming in the dream, frightened, and saying, how are you going to operate on me? Are you crazy? Don't you know there's no operation for me? They just sent me from the hospital. And how are you going to operate on me without anesthesia? The monk said, be not afraid, Nuhad. I am St.Charbel, and I've come to heal you. And he takes over, and he starts to knead on her neck with excruciating pain that she thought in the dream she was screaming. And those 2 monks were working on her and working on her, sewing her up. She looks to Mary in the dream and says, Blessed Mother, how can you see me in this agony? Will you please help me? She sees in the dream Mary lift off the table and center between the 2 monks and smile at her. Now this is a woman of great devotion and great simplicity. The monks finish, and the other monk, who is the helper, tells her, now you have to drink. He takes the pillow, which is usually at the foot of her bed, and he puts it behind her back the way they do it during the day. And she says, like you feed a child, he wrapped his arms around my back and took the straw out of the cup that's by my bed and gave me to drink. And she started to say, are you crazy? Don't you believe me? I have a stroke. I can't drink. I'm paralyzed. And he said, are you not believing? You are healed. And he gives her the water to drink. And everything disappears from the room. And Nuhad wakes up with the pillow behind her back, and he's swallowing the water she was given to drink in that moment. So all the vision was in a dream because of God's mercy. But awake, she swallowed the water to know that it was a reality. She touched her neck. She felt something leaking. She touched her neck. It was bleeding on her hand. She realized that she had moved her crippled hand to touch her neck. So her arm was moving. Then she could feel her toes move in bed. Her whole thighs and legs were moving. She was frightened. It was 3 a.m. She slipped out of bed and went to the bathroom and saw herself in the mirror. 2 cuts, completely bloody all over the place, stitches on her wounds, and completely walking. She went to her husband in his bedroom, and he passed out when he saw her standing up in the room. 4 a.m., she runs upstairs on her crippled knees. She walked upstairs to her son's apartment at 4 a.m., woke them up, told them everything that happened. By 7 a.m., the whole village was over. The doctors were involved, the hospitals were involved, the monastery was involved, the prior of the order. For days and days and days, Nuhad was barefoot, telling the story over and over and over and over to all these people, until she thought she was going to lose her sanity. So she went to hide in her summer home, and she sees St.Charbel again. And he says, Nuhad, your faith is great, and I was able to cut you by the power of God, but it's not for you. It's for the faith of the people, and you are an instrument. You cannot run away. I want you to go back. And I want to ask you, every 22nd of each month, which is the date of it was 22 January in 93. He said, every 22nd of each month, I want you to go to Annea with a procession with your family. Mass and prayers should be offered to God Almighty so that the faith of the people would return. She goes back home, and she goes full force. Of course, she cooperates with atheist doctors, made reports about her. If they tried to touch her stitches, they would get electrocuted. Every single stitch fell on her collar, none on the floor. When analyzed, they were human hair. So we think he used his beautiful beard because we love how he is so ascetic, and we all it's very personal and very touching that he used something from him to sew her up with stitches visible to the eye. After this, she sees Saint Rita, and she has a big devotion to Saint Rita. And she tells her pridefully, do you know that St.Charbel healed me? And Saint Rita says, I know, Nuhad, I know. Your faith is great, and you're going to be an instrument. As for the other monk, it was Saint Maron. So Saint Maron and St.Charbel visited this blessed woman. I'm going to show you the footage. I want you to know that ever since 1993, count the months, the 70-year-old woman, or she was 53, every single month, barefoot, under snow. They were at 1,000-meter altitude. Snow, sleet, cold, rain. She started with her family, and then the friends, and then the village, and then the people who knew about it, and then you're going to see who. Every single, the first 6 months, her wound was bleeding continuously. It was gushing blood. After that, it was drops of blood. But it was a sign for us, because we are incredulous. After that, every single year, on the anniversary of his feast, and on the anniversary of the miracle, her wound opens and bleeds. Till today, and you will see it last year. I didn't take pictures this year, but it was even more. She's much older right now and more. She's still walking barefoot in the procession to the Holy Blessed Sacrament, gathering the people for Mass, Rosary, any devotion that they can have to the Eucharist. This is what happened to Annea after this miracle. So this is Nuhad in the early years of the miracle. I'd say 6 or 7 years after the miracle. Here's her wound. Right there. Here's her wound, again, many years after the miracle. I am here to operate on you, he says. Here is her wound in 2015, on the anniversary of her miracle. I think they were having an interview, and I took advantage and took pictures of the TV. And you could see clearly how it's bleeding on both sides 22 years later. Here's her wound 22 years later. It's a Lebanese channel, not the regular MTV. Luckily, or it would have been good if it was that MTV. But do you get this incredible sign of greatness? What saint have we seen sew someone with stitches and leave this mark every single month of 24 years? The only miracle in Vatican noted of the sort. Here's what happens in Annea now. A procession with the Eucharist. This is the kind of people you see.
Oh, wow.
Is Lebanon Christian?
Wow.
Here's the kind of people you see on the Feast of St.Charbel, especially, so the Feast of St.Charbel is the 23rd of July, and so on the 22nd of July, you can imagine what happens. Because people sleep there a week in advance. You literally take a mat and a pillow and you're on the ground wherever you can find a spot. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., it's filled. This is the procession starting here, all the way here, and there's as much on the other side of the street. And that up there would have been the Hermitage. And all these, 15 minutes like this, sometimes you can't see the end of the road from people. This is what you see on the Feast of St.Charbel. This is the faith of the people. This is what kind of a saint he is. He gathers everybody. Again, this year there were 123 miracles. 13 were to Muslims. This is what his shrine looks like today. In the calmness and stillness of the night. This is very dear to my heart, because this is where I lay down when I go there and visit once a year. And sometimes it was just me alone, just on the foot of that tomb, just trying to draw a few words, but he's still very silent. Very beautiful. I took this picture so you could see what the square looks like. So this is the monastery today. And of course a basilica was erected in his name. This is a statue that's right by the Hermitage. St.Charbel comes to Nuhad often in her dreams, but right after the miracle, this is what he told her. I am in the Hermitage always. If ever anyone needs me, let them come and beg the Lord, and I'm there for help. So he's a very, very strong intercessor. His presence is not in the statue, it's just a reminder for us. He literally told her, I walk those fields and pray in the Hermitage. And so this is what the Hermitage looks like today. It's a beautiful place. It didn't look like that back then. It is so gorgeous as you stand here and you oversee the valley, you can see a little bit. It's breathtaking. Sometimes I would tell St.Charbel, no wonder you wanted to live here. I don't want to live here too. It's so amazing. Okay, very, very quickly, this is another miracle. A friend of ours, who became a friend after the miracle, because he came to speak and we hosted him. He was also a very devout man, a chemist, an engineer of chemistry, had a family, had an uncle who was a priest, and he prayed daily, but for one phase of life, felt a strong urge to go on a retreat. So what he would do is he would take candles, and every night after he would tuck his kids to bed at 9 p.m., he would leave and go and pray in certain places in the area. 9 years he did that, for 3 whole months of the year. So that one night he was in Annea, in the monastery, and he lined up his candles as a cross, and he sat down to pray at 10 p.m. All of a sudden, I'm telling you his exact words, I'm repeating his words, he started losing awareness of his surroundings. He was hearing the dogs and the coyotes in the village. He stopped hearing all that. There was a very strong wind that came. He was very cold, but all of a sudden he became very warm. He had to take off his clothes. And he would look at the candles, although the wind was ravaging all over the place, the flicker was not moving of the candles. So then he lost consciousness. He knew he was in the presence of someone else, another beautiful light, crystal clear light, and he knew he was in the presence of someone holy. He knew eventually it was St.Charbel, and he gave him a huge message for us, for the people, for salvation, for what we are doing. We're going this way, but the salvation is that way, he said. We're not walking the right path. Long story is, at 3 a.m. is when he finished the vision, and he had no consciousness of time, but he knew the candles could burn 4 hours, and he woke up and he found all the candles burnt. He traveled down to go to his home, but he was confused, very, very confused at what just happened. And his arm was itching him, so he had to pull over the side of the road, take off his sweater, and he found the mark of an arm. Before he left, he told the light, please don't leave me. And the light said, I am with you always. We think it was the embrace that St.Charbel left him for our incredulous minds. It was a burn of the 3rd degree, you say, the highest burn?
Yeah.
Or it's the 3rd degree. It was oozing, burning, dripping blood and pus, 0 pain. So that was examined over and over and over and over. He happened to see St.Charbel, I don't know how many times because he's very discreet, but we know that it was always the feast of the saint or something really important in the order of the monks, like if it was the feast of the order or something. And every time he sees St.Charbel, he gets a message and his burn re-inflames completely. I don't think it's going on anymore. It was through the course of a couple of years, but there's a book of messages of St.Charbel's words, who was so silent, and now he's starting to speak to us. So these are his miracles. This is the saint that I wanted to bring to you today. It's very late. We took the whole time allowed. And I just really wanted to say his greatness in life was not about sleeping on wood logs or stripping his body or wearing, the suffering elements of penance. I think his greatest attribute was the charity in which he lived all these things. His love for the Lord burned a flame in his heart, and so God is burning now in us the flame of his love. So I just wanted to bring him to you. I hope he blesses every one of you. I hope you grip to him because he's an example to us. We need silence. We need this love. We need this humility. And he's the man bridging all the gaps today. May he bless you and your families. My husband is a subdeacon in the Maronite Rite, so I feel that it would be fit if he gives you this blessing with the oil because Father had to leave, and he gave him his okay to do that. If you want to be blessed, please come up. If you want the novena or the story, a medal, anything you want. The medals are blessed by Father, so they are sacramental now. And I have a few prayer cards. Please make sure everybody gets some, so allow for everybody to get, and then get more if you want. And I just would like to end with a prayer that the Lord will carve in our hearts the same love that he carved in St.Charbel. And I just hope that whatever our needs are, this beautiful saint would come to our aid, not because we are an incredulous generation that needs signs, and no signs will be given to us but Jonah, and there's more than Jonah here, but because we are in need, and in God's mercy, we can receive healings. We can receive these signs that inflame our life with the presence of God, and that's what these saints do. How blessed we are to be Catholic and to have that help. You know that other religions are so dry, even other Christian religions. They don't have this to grip on. So may we grip onto him and walk with him this road of sanctity. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thank you so much for bearing with me for the long time. Anywhere you can get this explicit kind of story, so I hope it wasn't too much for you.